Hey, what's going on, beautiful people? Cobra Kai never die. So we're here with Chapter 11, Handshake Gate by Matt. Um, I'm I'm sorry for those of you who think these reviews on some level aren't genuine. They absolutely are, but I have to say it again. This chapter is my favorite one. Again, seeing their struggles at Ring of Honor. And keep in mind, I was privy to a lot more things at Ring of Honor at this time when the Bucks were there for a second time. Um, and, with Kevin Steen, now known as Kevin Owens, Jay Lethal, but, I had a lot of insight thanks to Davey Richards and people that I knew who worked at Ring of Honor in like administrative capacities and things like that. So let me just say this right off the bat, because I would imagine that when stuff comes out that they're writing about, like their sort of ill-fated WWE tryouts that they did to create buzz, and Handshake Gate, which is what this is named after, where RVD and Booker T both sort of implied that they were disrespectful. Like, I was privy to all of that stuff, and I actually remember checking up on it. That's when the Bucks were really on my radar. And their story holds up completely, as well as the things they say about what the boys were saying about Jim Cornette over Ring of Honor. I can totally back all of that up. That is everything that I was hearing. Like everything that I heard from guys that I had trained who worked for Ring of Honor, or guys that I knew who worked for Ring of Honor who I had become friends with during this time. I mean, they all called it, Smoky Mountain of Honor derisively. So again, I can confirm most of these things that they're talking about. Matt goes into their financial situation, like their cards are maxed out. Um, they had basically they were in a worse financial spot than before they worked for TNA because they had to pay for all their own stuff, and TNA only paid them $300 a match, and then sometimes didn't use them when they were there. But Matt's wife is very supportive, even though she's 6 months pregnant and, nauseous and all this kind of stuff, and being very supportive. But he's going through this sort of crisis of like, do I need to stop wrestling? Right. And they tell the story of switching planes in Atlanta, and he was just buying a chicken sandwich and it was declined and he had no way to pay for it. And he had to like yell at Nick to come over, and he's just humiliated. And brother, I've fucking been there. I'm kind of there now. Um, so it's just like I'm taking this trip to Georgia next week and driving there. And I'm actually budgeting out and like taking on all this like extra work with this mystery shopper thing so I can have money to make sure I have gas to get there. And I got bills coming up, and it's Christmas time. And anyway, I felt this chapter. But Nick is the one who just like, no, dude, you got to do it. He applied for a couple of jobs. Matt did, like one to be a UPS driver, one to be his box boy, and Nick just says, no, we got to keep doing it. So they call Hunter at Ring of Honor, and Cornette follows up with them, and they settle on $500 each. But paying for transportation and stuff like that, which is huge, and it's on a per show appearance, right? So PWG is still going well. And then Roderick Strong sort of let him know, did you see what RVD said about you guys? And RVD basically said, oh, they never introduced themselves or shook my hand. But they explained, and again, this is all confirmed by people I knew who worked at TNA at the time, that Rob was sort of a distant guy. So they always said hello, but they didn't like gush. And so it's just one of these things that's really funny to me, because when all these guys claim like nobody shook my hand, it's like you're supposed to be fucking shaking people's hands too. So how does that happen? Right? I mean, I certainly fucking did. When I ran PCW, I fucking went out of my way to say hello to everybody. Anyway. So how does it not happen to you if you're not making it? Whatever. So the RVD thing became a story. Nick gets the idea that WWE's in town next month. We should go there and create buzz, which will help us in the long term, which he's absolutely right about, by the way. Um, but Matt remembered some negative stories. An implication, I would guess that it's JBL. He peeked inside the dressing room full of extras and shouted TNA, TNA, TNA inside as a way of putting them down, which is just like, dick. And then an Olympic weightlifter turned wrestler, basically, I'm sure Mark Henry. And it's like, guys are smaller than my son and he's too. And there always was this vibe in the locker rooms. Like, it's a wrestling thing of like, oh, you gotta put people on edge. You gotta put them down. And obviously this is one of those things that stuck in their head that they weren't going to do later. Um, I don't even want to get into the thing that a notable wrestler said. I think there's a way why they didn't give it any identifying marks, because I mean, who are these two fags with you? Like, fucking terrible stuff, right? And I know some people will say, "Oh, it's wrestling and it was back then and blah blah blah." But again, it's just, I think Matt does such a good job of sort of setting up this notion of like, dude, it's just negative fucking thing and it's so unnecessary. And he's right about all of that, right? So they have their tryout matches. Long story short, the first night they're allowed to pick from the extras. So Scorpio Sky's there, the first guy that was nice to Nick in training. So it's like Scorpio Sky and Joey Ryan, and then they tear it up and do a Bucks match, right? And then the next day they put him with the Usos, and they're like, "We want to see how you sell." So they do a conventional match, but where they're selling and kind of getting beat down and stuff, and they do a great job again. But Booker T was like, "Oh, you're leaning on my jacket, shit," and then put that out there in that Booker T way. And so, and then, Tyler Williams, who's a guy that I'm familiar with for Bleacher Report, writes an article basically saying, are the Young Bucks burying their career? And I understand the power of articles like that, because the one I wrote on Deathmatch Wrestling, like, went everywhere, right? I kept it positive because I was blown away by the deathmatch experience, right? But I just as easily could have written something that torn apart. And those, by the way, are the articles that tend to get more traction. Um, just so you know. So it's not going well, right? But then when they come to the ring for their thing, they do the Booker T and Rob Van Dam poses, and it gets a big thing. And it's like, not only were, I love this line right here, not only were we going to ignore the elephant in the room, we're going to shine a giant spotlight on that elephant. And then they refuse the handshakes afterwards, which is very much not ROH. And then they have a shirt where they have like the handshake with the slash through it and all that kind of good stuff. You see where it's going. Dana gives birth to Courtney Louise. And, I got kids myself, and I know what that's like. Like, the drama from the handshake incident doesn't matter all of a sudden. And I totally get that. Then they're sort of talking about Jim Cornette and Ring of Honor and how it just wasn't a good place to be. And I love this line. If we're going to do anything memorable in wrestling, it wasn't going to happen at ROH at this time. We were booked in 6 to 8 minute matches, squandered in the middle of the card, doing nothing meaningful. Basically, they had a whole bunch of rules. You can't do pile drivers. You can't do this. You can't do that. And so they're like, this is worse than TNA. Is there a bigger insult from the Bucks, right? This is worse than TNA, Nick whispered when we were given that news. And then, Jim Cornette, because of budget cuts, we can't afford to fly in anyone coming in from Los Angeles for the next 3 months. But they still flew in Nigel McGuinness, Maria, and Mike Bennett, who also flew out of Los Angeles. So, I mean, I love how honest Matt is. Like, Dana and I were eligible for WIC, a federal assistance program for low-income mothers, so we could get some groceries for free. Otherwise, I don't know how we would have eaten. But, at PWG, things were good. And so they did a 3-way ladder match against Kyle O'Reilly and Adam Cole, and 2 Canadian wrestlers named Uno and Dos. And it's great. I remember that match. I remember hearing about it and then going out of my way to watch it and just going like, holy crap. And so then, things at this point at Ring of Honor are just going way downhill. So they do the old low morale speech. If you're unhappy, come talk to me. And it's like, well, we're unhappy. And, maybe we need to go beg for our old jobs back at TNA. That was kind of their bluff. right? And Cornette goes, I'm just the messenger. It's coming from higher up and can't afford your travel. Maybe you should try to get your old jobs back. Oh my God. At that moment, they regret leaving TNA and coming to Ring of Honor. Jay Lethal tries to give him a pep talk. So they go and they do a great match, but that was it. What are they going to do, right? I felt like I had hit rock bottom. WWE had passed on us multiple times. Our run at TNA was a letdown. Now ROH saw no value in us. We're simply running out of options. I saw myself as a successful wrestler supporting his family, but maybe I was wrong. So they have this kind of big talk with each other. And Nick convinces Matt to not quit wrestling, and Matt comes up with a last-ditch effort plan. It would be like throwing a Hail Mary pass during a football game. Our desperate attempts at saving our careers. The plan was to simply stop following the rules. The plan was to save nothing and do everything. The plan was to spit in the face of wrestling tradition. Okay, fine, but this is it. This is my last shot or I'm done. If we're going to do this, we need to do this our way. I'm done listening to other people. Nick agreed and thought he had the missing piece to our act. If we can bottle up that magic we've been creating at PWG and Reseda all these years and use it everywhere, nobody can touch us. So then their 1-year Ring of Honor contracts expire on October 1st, 2012. And they end this chapter with, we are now free agents of the wrestling world, our world, once and for all. Talk about a great Act 2 transitioning, right? I would consider this, because we're about the halfway point of the book. So this is the end of the sort of like rock bottom portion, the terrible portion of their lives, and now they just have to fucking take off all the shackles and just go for it. And I'm excited to read it from here on in. This chapter was absolutely fucking brilliant, and I love it. And as a piece of literary work, some people have said they really liked me comparing it to other works of American literature. So I'm going to do a little more of that in the future. But right now, I'm just interested in the story. I really like it. And again, if you're in wrestling or in any kind of performance, really, you absolutely need to read this book and get it. You just do. If you love pro wrestling, you should fucking have it anyway, right? It's the best wrestling book I've read this year. And I read a lot of wrestling books. So anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow with chapter 12.